From the moment this film starts, we are immediately thrown into battle. There are no sweeping city views, low angles of a creek, or swaths of quiet forest to show us where we are. Rebel Ridge opens with a close-up of Terry Richmond, played by Aaron Pierre, as he rides his bike down a desolate road. He's listening to a heavy metal playlist. He appears to be determined, focused, and in a hurry. It immediately makes you very curious about this character, who he is, where he comes from, and where he's going. Suddenly, Terry is knocked off his bike by a police cruiser, sending him flying and into the road. It's obvious that this police officer intentionally hit him, and in corrupt police officer true fashion, the situation is immediately escalated when the officers get out of their car and start pointing their guns at Terry, shouting at him not to move and to stay down. Over the course of this interaction, Terry remains calm, patient, and doesn't push the officers to continue to escalate. He probably has been in this position before, and seeing as he's ex-military, he knows his rights. He does everything in his power to appease the officers, Ed and Steve, who seem to become more and more agitated the longer he continues to maintain calm and not give them a reason. Terry thinks that he comes to an agreement with the officers, that if he lets them search his belongings, they will let him go. They find that he's carrying $36,000. He has this money because he intends to bail his cousin out of jail and has to do so at this very moment. The officers seem to get starry-eyed once they find the money. They then accuse Terry of carrying drug money and they take it. Terry is in disbelief, but he doesn't let this anger him somehow. The police inform Terry that if he wants to get the money back, that he can contest it later on, for which they will arrest him. It's a very enraging scene that doesn't make a lot of sense to the average person listening to it. Eventually, the police leave Terry and he continues on his way. After arriving at the courthouse and being denied the ability to bail his cousin out, he meets Summer, a clerk of the court. They sit down for a soda and she enlightens him on an insane American concept called civil forfeiture. Writer-director Jeremy Saulnier learned about civil asset forfeiture through random news articles he read online. He became fascinated with it, and the more research he did, the more it pissed him off. He couldn't believe that such a system could exist in America because it has so much potential to be corrupt. This visceral reaction he had from learning about this unbelievable process led to him writing this film. It's important that we have a solid understanding of civil forfeiture, as this is the basis for the movie's entire plot. Civil forfeiture is a process where law enforcement seizes assets from people who they suspect are involved in criminal or illegal activity. The seizing of these assets does not mean that owners of said assets are charged with a crime. Instead of a dispute between two individuals, civil forfeiture involves a dispute between law enforcement and property, like the cash that Terry was carrying, or in other cases, a house or a car. The assets are then seized because they are alleged to have been used for criminal or illegal purposes. For example, during the Prohibition era in the United States, police often took cars, cash, property, and equipment used by those bootlegging alcohol and distributing it illegally. More recently, since the start of the war on drugs in the early 80s, civil forfeiture has increased by local, state, and federal governments. Seeing as it is more difficult for cartels to launder money through the modern banking system, when they find large amounts of cash through arrests or raids, they are often looked at as being achieved through illegal means, then seized. Exactly what happened to Terry meeting Officer Steve and Ed. I think it's safe to say that there is some modicum of a good place that this initial idea came from, but we all know that it takes very little for the overreaching arm of the law to become corrupt. When the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984 came about, it allowed local and federal law enforcement agencies to share the seized assets, money, cars, homes, buildings, and here is where we have our problem. A problem that is explored in the film as its central conflict. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see how such a law could easily become dishonest and unscrupulous, especially when the government and specific individuals have much to gain. Not to mention the motivation this actually gives them to seize assets and over-police. Civil forfeiture and the war on drugs was heavily supported by the Ronald Reagan administration. His attorney general is quoted as saying, "It's now possible for a drug dealer to serve time in a forfeiture finance prison after being arrested by agents driving a forfeiture finance automobile while working in a forfeiture funded sting operation. When assets get seized, everyone's pockets are greased and everyone eats. But let's get back to Rebel Ridge. Summer tells Terry that the police have previously used the civil forfeiture money to buy a $900 margarita machine for the police station, which interestingly enough was a real thing that happened in real life that Saulnier decided to add to the film. She explains to him how when the case is brought before the court, he won't even be named. It will be the township of Shelby Springs versus $36,000. And because his property has no rights, it will take so much more money to defend it and get it back. Terry informs Summer of the urgency of him needing to get his cousin out of jail before he goes to the state prison, which is because he was a witness in an investigation and he cooperated with the police. We see Terry sleeping in the woods and eating fish captured straight from a river. He's such a mysterious character who has appeared out of nowhere, and we still don't know much about him at all. But we can see that there's a tempered calm and quiet rage about him, which actor Aaron Pierre does so well. The next day, Terry goes to the police station and attempts to file a police report for his stolen money. He even brings cups of coffee for the officers as a peace offering, which shows us that once again, Terry doesn't want any problems. The police chief, Sandy, is of no help, and he's extremely aggressive to Terry for having the nerve to come up to the station making any requests. Terry proposes to Chief Sandy that if he gives him $10,000 of the money back, that he will disappear and won't bother them for the remaining $26,000. They come to an agreement, but of course, because these officers are jerks, things don't go over as planned. Terry returns to the station a few days later as agreed to, only to find out that his cousin is on his way to prison without him even seeing him. Terry showed up 3 minutes late, most likely due to the donuts he stopped to buy as a second peace offering. Terry immediately chases after the bus, which he does end up catching up with, telling his cousin to stay strong. I'm not really sure why Saulnier chose to make his cousin instead of his brother. Seeing that Terry is such a rogue character, I think his one and only brother, his one and only family in the world, might have made his motivations much stronger to me as a viewer. His desire to start a boat hauling business with his brother makes a lot more sense to me, personally. Who wouldn't want to save their cousin's life if they could? But seeing as we never got to know the cousin at all to care about him, I feel like that puts too much distance between us as viewers and the person Terry is trying to save. I think that knowing it was his one and only brother would have given me the additional understanding of why Terry is the way he is. Terry heads back to the courthouse and finds Summer, who is going to help him. She seems to have already, a long time ago, seen the corruption going on in the department. Back at the station, the police officers start to do a deep dive of research, trying to find more info on Terry Richmond. The police are clearly very apprehensive about Terry and his potential military and combat past. When Chief Sandy meets Terry once again to discuss what happened, he is elated to have tricked and deceived him. A shit-eating grin, as he said. He takes joy in stepping on people he believes to be beneath him, and he is on an international power trip. Tensions escalate as Terry's patience wears thin. We have to hand it to Aaron Pierre because he locked in on the posture and mannerisms of an ex-military and martial arts expert down to his fingertips. I think we all know that this film is going to make a star out of Pierre. Sandy pulls his gun out and Terry immediately disarms him, and then disarms Officer Steve. We can see that this is a man who doesn't intend to harm, but disarm. He moves similar to Batman, who tries to use minimum violence and only when absolutely necessary. Terry takes control of the situation and holds the officers hostage. He is only there to get his money, which he forces Officer Jess to get for him. When in the property room, Terry is able to see all of the assets that the police have seized, including guns and other money. They stage a false arrest and Officer Jess walks Terry out of the building. One of the so-called concerned citizens, who saw the interaction minutes prior, shouts that Terry should be strung up, a blatant call for him to be lynched. It shouldn't be lost on anyone that there are racist overtones to the police officer's actions, with Terry pointing out that Officer Jess is driving an older vehicle while her colleagues drive newer ones that were probably sponsored by civil forfeiture. Terry makes it to the courthouse and pays the money for his cousin's bail. Immediately after, he is tased and taken down, and then moved to a dark and dirty basement. One of the original officers that seized Terry's money is there, and they take him back to the police station where they meet yet again with Officer Sandy. They take a drive. Over the course of the drive, Chief Sandy gives his "and I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kid" speech. He explains to Terry that the money seized is the police department's operating budget for a while. He claims that all the money that they take goes directly back into the community. He basically reveals his entire master plan and why he does what he does. He apologizes to Terry, saying that if he knew who he was, he wouldn't have acted the way he did. Not that that makes anything better, considering they shouldn't behave like that to anybody. They arrive at a hospital where Chief Sandy tells him that his cousin has been stabbed up pretty badly, just out of processing, and that the cousin was currently being helicoptered to the hospital. Instead of saying sorry, he tells him, "Just because you were right doesn't mean we were wrong." He refuses to take any accountability. "I fucking told you!" Terry screams at them. Chief Sandy then gives him the remaining $26K, a new truck, and tells him to be on his way, and that if he tries to get revenge, he will either go to jail for 30 years or that there would be an even worse outcome. Just take this money and pretend that this never happened. Terry doesn't even know what to do or what he can do at the moment, as the chief didn't give him an out. Sitting beside his deceased cousin at the hospital, Terry is defeated and crying. He takes his cousin's hospital bracelet as a keepsake. He then meets up with Summer, who drives him to get his new truck. She informs him that there is a lot of corruption going on in the department, including arresting people and giving them unwarranted charges. As they cross over county lines, the police officer following them turns around. The deal is sealed. Terry picks up his car and tells Summer he is not interested in pursuing the matter further. Late that night, Summer is awakened by the sounds of an intruder. As she stumbles around the house to find the source of the noise, she finds a needle in her bathroom sink. She has been injected with drugs. She calls Terry and he immediately drives to her house, breaking the agreement he had with Chief Sandy and the officers. We learn that Summer has a past of being an addict, and that she has been sober and trying to stay on the straight and narrow in order to get back custody of her child. She worries that she's going to get tested for drugs and she will not only lose her job, but lose the potential to get her child back. Terry stays with Summer to make sure she gets to work okay, and they agree to put this all behind them. She heads into the office, and of course, she suddenly has to take a drug test. Her boss tells her that he is testing her because of some information given to him. 3 guesses from who. As Terry leaves Summer's house to continue on his way, he is again pulled over by one of the officers who seems to really have it out for him. Terry asks Officer Steve about why he didn't turn his lights on, which we find out is because if the lights are turned on, then the dash cam starts recording. The officer then screams, "Gun!" to falsely accuse Terry of trying to shoot him. He shoots Terry in the shoulder and a struggle ensues. Terry somehow manages to disarm him and then tase him. He narrowly escapes and drives his truck into the woods, then ditches it. Terry heads back to town and arrives at the Chinese restaurant that he previously had a stake in. Summer eventually meets him, where his gunshot wound is being treated by the restaurant owner. They acknowledge that the cavalry hasn't come after them because the police must be more afraid of them than the opposite. In this moment, Terry decides that he is not going to just self-preserve like he had been trained to do in the Marines and his martial arts. He wants to put a stop to what is going on and get justice for his cousin, himself, and everyone else these officers have harmed. Terry and Summer meet up with her colleagues who help her narrow down the places they should be looking. They realize that everything coincided with a lawsuit against the department about an illegal search that resulted in a wrongful death. They head over to Summer's boss's house, who is apologetic about everything that happened. He tells them how they had wanted to get rid of Chief Sandy for a long time and hand the police contract over to the state, but Sandy started his civil forfeitures and funded the police department as well as paying others off and doing things in the community like Christmas lights or 4th of July fireworks. Terry learns that the police brutalized his cousin enough that they could be sued and that it was on tape. They decide that they need to get a hold of the police camera footage at the courthouse in order to bring this whole thing down. While looking through the courthouse files, police officers are there looking for stuff too. They even attempt to light the whole building on fire. Despite this, Summer and Teddy are able to get the drives they need. Terry heads out and leaves Summer at the building, who tries to go and steal back her urine sample for the drug test. She ends up being caught by police doing a dummy check of the building. They kidnap her, and Terry sees this and goes after them. Unable to catch up, Terry and the officers agree to meet the next morning for a swap. Terry calls the police station and speaks to Chief Sandy, informing him that stuff is about to get real. He crashes into the back of the police station, cracking open the wall with the forfeiture assets, which seems like an allegory for the police station being exposed and showing their whole ass. Terry shoots Chief Sandy with a non-lethal round and ties him up. The rest of the police department arrive at the station for the final showdown. Then suddenly, Officer Jess pulls her weapon on Terry and forces him outside. The whole movie, Officer Jess has been an interesting character. She seems to show some sympathy towards Terry, as she knows her boss and coworkers are pieces of crap, but her loyalties to Blue seem to be stronger than her desire to try and change anything. You just really can't get a read on her and which side she stands on. Chief Sandy's right-hand man in debauchery, Officer Steve, takes the drives from Jess and destroys them. Steve taunts Terry about winning this battle and having Summer in the back of his vehicle, who has yet again been injected with drugs. She claims she hid them and shot herself up in the back, preemptively creating a narrative for what he's about to do next. Officer Ed, the same officer in the beginning who originally seized Terry's money, steps forward in an attempt to stop the situation from further escalating. The scene is very reminiscent of old westerns, where the hero and the villain meet to have the final shootout in the Times Square at noon. Officer Ed seems to have had a conscience in this moment, because he ends up pulling his gun, resulting in everyone pulling guns on everyone. No one knows who to trust in this moment. No honor among thieves, right? Chief Sandy ends up coming out and shooting Ed in the thigh, because Ed was gonna foil their master plan of eliminating Terry and Summer. Chief Sandy must have accidentally shot Officer Ed in an artery in his thigh because he is bleeding badly. When Officer Jess says she's gonna call 911, Chief Sandy tells her, hold on. It seems like Sandy is considering killing Ed now too. This man will do anything to save his own ass and continue to line his pockets. He's as wicked as it gets. Suddenly, Terry grabs Officer Ed and drags him behind a police car and a shootout ensues. Officer Ed tells him that he has to turn on the police lights so that the recording can begin, which will include the 2 minutes prior to the start of the recording. Terry does everything he can to safely disarm people by stealing their guns and emptying the clips, smashing heads, choking people out, knocking them out, and launching smoke grenades. He manages to turn on the police lights and thus the camera before escaping in the car with Summer and Officer Ed. The police shoot out one of their tires as they're in full-on panic mode, desperately trying to take the three of them out. Over the radio, we can hear the police are talking about using an AR against them and boxing their cars in. Just then, Officer passes Terry, crashes into Chief Sandy's vehicle, running him off the road. It's revealed over the scanner that the state police have gotten involved and they are giving the trio an escort to the hospital. Terry gets emotional as he realizes that this is finally coming to an end. When they arrive at the hospital, in one long smooth tracking shot, Terry lifts Summer out of the car and brings her inside, placing her on a hospital bed. He steals an emergency axe and heads back to the cruiser, cutting out the video storage box so that this police department turned criminal enterprise can exist no longer. Rebel Ridge is an exhilarating conspiracy action thriller that had my phone down, eyes wide, and mouth agape. This is surely to be the role for Aaron Pierre so far. I know we can look forward to seeing him in a lot of movies in the next 1 to 3 years. Writer-director Jeremy Saulnier said that within minutes of talking to Pierre over Zoom, he knew that he was perfect for the role of Terry Richmond. It's not hard to see why. This guy is an action star in the making. He was fantastic as Malcolm X in Hulu's series Genius MLK/X, and that's going to make it exciting to watch Pierre's career unfold. He has the range to play such a larger-than-life historical figure with a lot of baggage, while also being able to play a role like Terry Richmond. We're going to have to keep an eye on this guy. The cinematography in the film by David Gallego really makes you feel like you're riding along with Terry in the film. What I love about this movie is that it's just the essentials. There aren't huge explosions, crazy sets, a bunch of junk props, crazy clothes, no bells or whistles. I feel like this movie gets down to the bare bones of just having a damn good lead character and a damn good story with an interesting and compelling central conflict. The film uses practical effects and realistic camera movements. The cinematography is not super stylish or experimental, and I think that's a strength that the film isn't doing too much. This is a serious action movie, but it has lighthearted moments that show it doesn't take itself too seriously. There are also a few memorable lines too, like Terry telling Chief Sandy, "Nah," or telling Summer how he's gonna haunt the officers for his cousin. Or even Chief Sandy's line, "The suspect is armed, he goes down and he does not get back up." Watching Rebel Ridge the second time, I enjoyed it a bit more and caught stuff that I didn't see or hear the first time around, so make sure you give this one a second look. Thank you guys so much for watching this movie recap and analysis. Please like the video, leave a comment, subscribe, and share it with your movie-loving friends. I'll catch up with you guys in the next one.